The Inferno build. Welcome on in, everybody. I love playing Fire Staff and Rapier, and ever since I got the Inferno staff, I was really excited to try this setup out. And I can say without a doubt, the Inferno is the hardest hitting Fire Staff I have ever played this build with. Oh my god, 6k Fireball, 6k Pillar, 6k Burnout. I don't even know what to say. And then all the dots that you throw on top of it, People get melted by this build. Groups of people will get melted when you drop that AoE on them. And it goes without saying, Fire Staff Rapier is one of the most mobile weapon sets that you can run. And I have absolutely cranked up the healing power on this. I don't mean to toot my own horn, but I really outdid myself with this one. It was tough to get all this stuff together on the Iron Man, and yeah, very, very satisfied with how this turned out. Of course, there's a written guide to this build on my website, pvpnewworld.com. There's a link to it down below if you guys are interested in that. Let's start with that commentary. Right off the bat, look at that healing power. Absolutely insane. And then we drop a massive fireball on these two as they come around the corner. And not only do I get that guy with the flesh to finish him off, the other player just died straight up from the fireball and the burns. Yeah. That much damage. These 7-8k squishies, man, they can take like one hit from this build and then they are in massive trouble. And here you can see again, the archer player, I do a good job just kind of doing a bit of a weave. He misses all his shots. And oh, that burning damage, man, so good. And that particular clip there, those guys were chasing me around for a while, so getting that X against them felt really good. Moving on to the next fight, right off the bat, we jump on top of this archer, start dumping the fire staff damage in, and two more players show up after I get the kill. Right away, the burnout to go through them. In a build like this, you always want to be changing directions as often as possible when you're fighting opponents. If you run in a static direction, it makes you very easy to predict where you're gonna go, and very easy to chase. But here you can see, as soon as I go through the doorway and there's a bit of obstruction on the line of sight, I load up the heavy attack, and when I see the player, I hit him with the heavy and then go right through him again. And it ended up working quite well. These guys didn't chase super hard, and I head back towards these pillars here. I could have stayed inside the fort, but honestly, I really like fighting on these pillars, so I've been sticking around here fighting these past few days myself. And here I engage with these two. I start by opening with the fireball, get him with a huge pillar as he goes all flamethrower mode. I try to catch him with the riposte, and unfortunately I don't get it, and he just holds flamethrower. So one fireball in his face and he goes down. I mean, the guy's got to not hold flamethrower at that moment. That's really what just happened. And then this guy, so much damage from the burnout. The pillar hits him, and then the flesh through, and man, that burst just tearing him apart. And a little bit of time goes by, and I just keep hanging out here, and some more enemy players head towards these pillars. Again, you're very careful with the movement as I engage. I'm making sure that I'm trying to apply that range damage, and when they get close, I want to try to have the drop on them with my rapier. I go around the corner, a little bit of line of sight, and then charge that burn up out. Kind of important with burn up, it's got a long wind up animation, so if you want to catch people with surprise, you have to make sure you're line of sighted when you charge it up. There you see the enemy player did the same thing against me. I didn't see him coming with the burnout until he's already in the animation, and he ended up hitting me with it. It's very hard to avoid that kind of an attack. And then I go for the burnout through again, throw the fireball down. He does a great job dodging. I load up the heavy attack thinking this guy's actually going to come around the corner, but he doesn't, and he pops into the flamethrower. I'm just right away going to respond by going for the flesh through. With the flamethrower boys, especially with a build like this, we have a lot better burst damage than them, but if we sit next to them, they're just going to melt us with that flamethrower. So it's a very in and out. And there you see, the guy comes around the corner, big damage with the fireball into the pillar, and he ends up going down, and I right away jump on top of this other player. He goes into the flamethrower, and I go for the riposte, but again, he's just out of range. Unfortunately, riposte, just not a great counter against flamethrower. In those particular fights, I think something like Flourish and Finish would actually come in a lot more handy, because you can at least interrupt the flamethrower and make sure you get on top of them. Anyway, moving on to the next fight. Still hanging out in my favorite area here. Two enemy players jump on top of me. I go for the riposte a bit early. Fortunately, he throws the grenades down, and I do get the riposte procced from an arrow shot, but the grenades would have procced it anyway, and I stay on top of this guy, making sure I can keep as much damage as possible. I switch to the fire staff, and then go for the burnout, and he just goes down right before I hit him to the burns that are on him already. And I turn around and head back towards this enemy player there. There's a 4.5k fireball, and I'm not within Inferno range. Oh man, I love to see that kind of stuff. And he ends up running, and I try to hit him with my fire staff, and Yeah, I don't know what to say, guys. He dodges all my moves. Well, maybe I just missed all my shots. One of the two, either way. He gets away, and I don't manage to get the kill on him. He gets inside the gate there, and I'm not going to pursue him. And moving on to, I think, the last clip of the video. Kind of a longer fight here, but I like this one. And with these videos, especially a build guide, I like to include a little bit more larger group stuff. Because I know not everybody is going to be out there playing solo. And yeah, so let's get into it. This one here, if one player goes down, he's kind of low health already, and then this guy, I just stick to his tail, he blows his stamina, and he ends up going down to just the rapier spam. And I put some damage into that guy, go for the burnout. I actually get a great connection on the one player there, both hits critting. But I decided not to stick out there. There's a lot of enemy players, and it was a good call because they end up following me inside here. Yeah, bad timing on the riposte there. I knew the stun was coming. I was trying to catch him at the last second just to be a little cheeky with it, but he ends up hitting me with it, and then I'm forced to kind of retreat out of there. And this fight here is a great example, again, of that movement. Look how I'm always changing direction. Evade one direction, roll the other direction, and it makes it very discouraging for people to chase you. Right away, this Hammer and Great Axe player just says, okay, I'm not going to bother unless he comes towards me. And I eat his incoming stun. That's all on me again. Oh, I had all the time in the world to dodge that, and I didn't. Go for the burnout. Now that the friendly has gone down, it's just me, and they're putting a lot of AoE down, and I'm just kind of fencing them. There's a great bait to get that riposte stun, and they hit me with the stagger right away. Direction change, gap close through them, and unfortunately, I do get hit by that immobilize from the Void Gauntlet. Thankfully, though, there's not a lot of pressure on me, and I get upstairs nice and safely. And this guy hits me with a lot of damage on his bow shot, so drop down the edge, and another player around the corner. Always in PvP, you gotta watch out behind you. There's guaranteed someone hiding behind you. I throw the fireball down on him, get the riposte, huge damage on the backstab. Oh my god. Gotta love the damage on this build, and especially the rapier there. I have 100 points in dex on this setup, so I think it's paying off right there. And I head back towards the inside of the outpost, and the Great Axe player jumps on top of me. He gets the gravity well on me, but I just sit there, wait for his counter, and hit him with the riposte, and I managed to successfully survive that encounter. And then I right away switch towards the musket player. I want to stay on top of him because he's definitely more squishy than this bruiser. In all honesty, I think the bruiser is a really good matchup for us, though, because he has a really hard time keeping up with us. And we can put a lot of damage in much quicker than the slower weapons than he has. But yeah, in this particular situation, you definitely want to take the archer down. This guy makes a huge error. He blows his stamina. So we're just going to poke him a few times. He ends up going down. And then a lot of players come in here. Lots of enemies, lots of friendlies. I throw down the fireball on this guy trying to get the kill. I go for the flesh through. Unfortunately, he gets healed by himself, I think. And then he gets his rapier goodness, so I don't bother trying to pursue that kill. Now I'm in kind of a tricky spot. Again, that direction change. Evade backwards, roll back through them, and go up the staircase. And then right away aggressive on top of the first player that I can find here. He ends up jumping off the edge. And man, this is beautiful. This is why I love this build, guys. So much AoE damage. Look at that! Oh my god, the fireball, the pillar into the flesh, and that's definitely one body on the ground there. The other guy very close to dead, but I think they got the healing circle down, so that's not going to be a finishable kill for me, but I do manage to stick to kind of a squishier player there. And then as I come up the side here, I just switch targets to the archer. If I can keep as many people off these walls as possible, it's better for me. And oh man, such a clean connection. Burnout hitting him for over 5k there. He ends up going down to that. And then, yeah, just go back to shooting at these guys from up top. The beauty of this build is that it's a 15-meter radius, so yeah, in this particular situation, a lot of these guys are within that range. And I managed to seal one more kill when I dive back in the group. And there you go. Okay, let's take a look at that build. So, starting off with the attribute points, I have quite a bit in dexterity for a fire staff build. 100 dex, 350 intel, 50 focus, and 100 constitution. Now, the 100 dexterity is for two reasons. Number one, you actually get a bit of a decent damage bonus. The 5% bonus damage while at full health and 5% damage while stamina is not full does make up for the fact that we're losing the 100 points in intelligence. You get really bad diminishing returns at 350 plus. So you're going to be dealing a little bit less damage with this setup with the Fire Staff, assuming these conditions are met, than if you put all these points into the intelligence. But the big plus here is that we get a whole bunch of additional rapier damage for this build. Now, if you want to favor the Fire Staff damage on this build, you can definitely put more in intel. I would recommend at least 50 dex for this build, though. For the Constitution and Focus, I've gone with 100 Con and 50 Focus. This is kind of a weird split, but I really like it for this build. We've invested pretty heavily into healing power on this spec, and assuming I had the perfect gear I wanted, I would have even more investment in healing power with things like shirking heals. So in my opinion, I feel like putting the extra 50 points in Constitution is not worth putting it into Focus instead. I'm already wanting to run 25 Focus for the cooldown reduction anyway, and then that 10% additional healing. We can get a 5.7k heal on the healing potion with this build. Now, if you wanted to go bulkier, you could definitely take some points out of Dex or Intel and put them into Constitution as well. 150 Con or even 200 Con are good ideas for this build, depending on the player and your personal preferences. Okay, let's take a look at the gear that I'm running. Starting off with the Rapier, I've got the Keratin Rapier. This guy comes loaded with Rogue and Keenly Jagged, and I put the Omnidirectional Evade perk on here. Pretty great Rapier for the build all around. Instead of Rogue, I would prefer something like Penetrating Backstab, or even Penetrating Backstab and Rogue with Omni are a great idea too. I've also got the Augmented Ignited Gem on there for 50% conversion to fire damage, and then of course that burn whenever I attack as well. If you don't want to go fire damage on the Rapier, you don't have to. Honestly, in some situations, it might give you more damage because people build a lot against fire damage. And then for the Fire Staff, we've got the Inferno. This guy hits hard. 20% additional damage when you are within range, within 15 meters of a target, which is a huge radius for that damage bonus. Keenly Empowered Vicious, and then my perk of choice was Empowering Fireball. I think Empowering Fireball is the way to go. 5 to 6k fireballs on crit with this guy. I'm not kidding. It hits crazy hard up close. You could always go with Attunement here instead. Unfortunately, Alacritous Punishment is not an option for the final perk on Inferno. And then for the armor, I've definitely focused on Elemental Aversion this patch. I've got 3 Elemental Aversion and then 1 physical from the Tumbler Feet Wraps. On the chest piece, I have Enchanted Ward. I would prefer the Ellie version here as well. Ideally, I would also have Shirking Heals on all of my pieces of gear. Unfortunately, I only have 2 Shirking Heals on at the moment. And then the third perk for the gear would be Refreshing or Shirking Energy for the legs. This would cover 4 out of 4 Refreshing on your gear, give you a lot of elemental resist against very common incoming attacks from Boltcaster and Fire Staff nowadays. And of course, that additional healing from Shirking Heals. My gear, unfortunately, isn't perfect, but I did manage to get those additional fire damage rune glass gems on. This is really nice for the Fire Staff, not as important for the Rapier, but does help out a little bit. And then when I take a look at the jewelry, I've got the Azoth Crystal Amulet. Ideally, instead of Refreshing, I would have Stamina Recovery here. Divine is perfect. That increases the healing from basically everything, including potions. I'm not sure if it's supposed to, but it does increase potion healing as well, so definitely my preferred perk. If you don't go for Divine here, you could always go with something like Thrust Resist or Fire Resist. And then for the ring, I've got Hardy, Keen Awareness, and Leeching. This is perfect for the build. Maybe instead of Leeching, going for Burning would be a little bit better. Since this build easily hits the Empower cap for Fire Staff, you don't want to go fire damage here, I think. Keen Awareness is definitely the way to go. And then for the earring, I've gone with the Endless Thirst. This was buffed quite a lot recently. 33% additional healing on all your healing consumables. This includes the healing potion, the regeneration potion, and the hearty meal. So we've actually got a ton of healing power, especially for having very low health on a build like this. The healing power from Focus, the Divine here, and then finally Endless Thirst. On top of it, we also get the Empower and the Fortify when we drink a potion thanks to Endless Thirst. The final perk here, I would prefer to have Regenerating. You could go with Refreshing Toast as well, but I think in the course of a fight, you're going to get more healing out of Regenerating than you would Refreshing Toast. In short, though, this is a fantastic healing option now, and yeah, for a squishy build, it gives you really strong burst heals, which is super helpful in PvP. And then for the gems on my gear, I've gone with a 9.5% elemental damage resistance across the board, and then 4 thrust gems on the armor for 16% thrust resist. The 1 physical aversion gives us about 20% resist against incoming thrust damage, and we've got a pretty decent amount of resist against incoming elemental damage, which is, again, a very common damage type this patch. And then for the consumables, of course, you want to run health, regen, mana potions, and then, of course, hearty meals for that additional healing I would highly recommend, especially since we're running the Endless Thirst. And also something worth mentioning is all the buff food you want to run. The Energizing Hearty Meal for additional mana regen, some max stat food. I've gone with the banana pudding for some dexterity, and then, of course, Desert Sunrise to reduce dot damage. And you can always add in a Honing Stone. This build, again, is very close to the Empower cap, but the Honing Stone is still worthwhile. I would recommend the Tier 4 instead of Tier 5 Honing Stone, because the Tier 5 costs so much more, and it is so not worth the extra cost. Now, taking a look at the weapon mastery on this build, the Rapier tree, very straightforward. Basically a full Grace tree, except we've got the first 2 perks in blood up here. This is my favorite way to play Rapier. Since we have a ranged weapon with Fire Staff, I like running Riposte. If I didn't have a ranged weapon, or if you just want to mix it up, you could run something like Flourish and Finish instead, or even something like Flurry if you have the weapon perk for the invincibility that it can give you. In short, though, this kit is great on Rapier. We've got great offensive and defensive options here, lots of really fast cancelable burst as well. And then when I take a look at the Fire Staff tree, I've gone with a super weird tree here. And a big reason for it is that I'm sitting at the Empower cap really easily on this build. So Runes of Helios we don't need, because that goes towards the Empower cap, and we most of the time are not going to get great usage out of it on this build. Starting off with the skills, Pillar of Fire, Fireball, and Burnout. My favorite way to play Fire Staff. And all of these abilities are great, fast AoE skills that can deal that huge damage up close, especially Burnout. This build can hit 6k plus burnouts pretty consistently. It's pretty sweet. Anyway, Fireball and Pillar, I didn't take the last 2 perks here because they have mostly to do with mana sustain or cooldown reduction, and I wanted to favor as much damage as possible on this build. So for the Fire Mage tree, you can see I've gone with all the sources of Empower that I can, the increased burning duration, Spell Slinger for that critical damage, and or critical chance, sorry, and Prophet of a Fire God for that additional critical damage. On the Pyromancer side of things, I've gone with all the passives here. The Smolder for additional Fortify. Fun fact, this build is rocking like 50% Fortify as well when you've got all your stuff going. And then Heat It Up for that additional Smolder. And then, of course, some more access to burns, additional burn duration. Trial by Fire, a pretty fun one with a longer cooldown, but it adds AoE burst when you need it, especially when you're landing things like that Burnout on players. So I do like having this addition, and especially since we can't get much out of something like Runes of Helios, this is a great alternative damage option. And then I've got Combat Speed, of course, and then Watch It Burn for the light attacks to inflict burns as well. So a very offensive Fire Staff tree that definitely reflects the fact that we can reach that 50% Empower cap with it. And there you go, guys. That is the build. Of course, there's a written guide on my website, pvpnewworld.com. There's a link to it down below if you want to check it out. And if you want to catch me live on Twitch, there's a link to that down below for you too. I do the New World Top 5 fights. If you have an awesome fight you want to see featured, you can send that to Kristofer at pvpnewworld.com. And of course, a big thank you to our sponsor, ExpressVPN. They can help keep you safe on the internet, and you guys can get a deal with them thanks to the link down below. A big thank you to all of my patrons on Patreon for supporting the show. I hope you guys have been enjoying the content and you're looking forward to more. Have a great night, everybody, and I'll see you next time.